Taoiseach, last week we had the debacle around your green list, and your travel advice was and is confused and ambiguous and relies on citizens using their best judgment. Now, personally, I would prefer that nobody would travel abroad this year, but the fact is that what we have is advice only, not a firm instruction, much less a legal requirement. And yet you've taken it on yourselves to send officials to our airports seeking out people on the COVID payment who have, in their best judgment, decided to travel. You're singling out one section of our population without notice or warning. And on the basis of advice, and confused advice is that, at that, you want to punish and make an example of people who lost their job because the government closed down the economy because of the pandemic. Taoiseach, many of these are the same people who were excluded from your Stay and Spend initiative, so you're not going to help them to holiday at home. Many of them indeed had booked and paid for a holiday months ago, but because of your ambiguous travel advice, they may not qualify for a refund, and so they face potentially the loss of substantial money. And now we know that you, in a final insult to them, will penalise them if they do travel, even if it is to one of your green list countries. Talk about every which way and lose. Taoiseach, I want you to acknowledge that your travel advice does not have the force of law, to accept that your travel advice is confused between green and non-green countries, between the need to restrict movement on return and not, that you have uniquely chosen those who have lost their jobs to be punished should they choose to travel abroad. I want you to accept that this is wrong, and more importantly, I want you to reverse this decision. A decision, I understand, which was incorporated into social welfare guidance early on Monday morning, just 24 hours after the Taoiseach had set out his position on RTE. Taoiseach, the Taoiseach also claimed that the Department of Social Protection gets information from the airports, but the Dublin Airport Authority at the COVID committee this morning categorically denied that they collect such information. They say that they have no details on who collects such data in their facilities. So can you clarify for us, please, who is collecting this information? What is the legal basis for collection of such information? And will this now stop? Because this is yet another episode in an unfolding farce.
Thank you very much, Deputy Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, there is no debacle in relation to the travel advisory, as the Deputy has suggested in her opening remarks. And I would say that Ireland, the Republic of Ireland in particular, in sharp contrast to Northern Ireland and to the decisions taken by the Deputy's own party, is probably one of the more restrictive travel guidance globally, and the results are there for all to be seen. And clearly the introduction of the pandemic unemployment payment has to be acknowledged by all, was a very unprecedented response and a fair response to the COVID-19 emergency. And at its height in May, up to 600,000 people were paid through that payment. As the economy began to reopen, people have gone back into unemployment or into employment. The numbers claiming it have gone down to 287,000. So by any yardstick, it's been a very massive national response. And I think Deputy McDonald in her opening remarks is endeavouring to create the picture that somebody's out to get somebody, or that there's a punitive approach being adopted by the state. I can say that is not the position of the government. The government has been anxious to help people who were made unemployed as a result of COVID-19, hence the unprecedented numbers on a very special payment, which the government has decided to keep going to the end of March, albeit at different levels. And I would make the point that The Department of Social Protection carries out compliance inspections at ports and at airports since 2012. The Deputy is well aware of this, and that is ongoing. And the primary purpose of those checks has always been to check that social welfare payments are paid to people residing in the state and in compliance with the regulations. And since March of 2020 of this year, over 2,000 PUP claims have been closed as a result of checks carried out at Dublin Airport. And I've been informed by the department concerned that the vast majority of these cases relate to individuals leaving the country who are not holiday makers but are leaving the country on a permanent basis. They do not live here and they're not entitled to the payment, so the payment has been stopped. Now, I think most people in that scenario would say that has to be checked on an ongoing basis, and it's important in terms of the wider application of these schemes that that type of thing is dealt with. And the department is very clear in relation to that. And in terms of, if you look at it in the overall perspective, we're talking about a very handful of cases where claimants have had their payments suspended because of the changes that the department made in the context of the government's travel advice. In other words, the government has been advising consistently that the safest thing is not to travel. It's not been encouraging travel. It's not been incentivising travel. And the Department of Social Protection were anxious in terms of the holiday arrangements for recipients of social welfare payments, that they would be in accord and in alignment with the travel advice from government generally. So we're talking about very small numbers here out of 287,000 who continue to receive the payment. And I think, you know, there is no agenda here in terms of endeavouring to penalise any one sector as opposed to the other. I remember the former Labour Party leader Joan Burton saying, when she introduced the legislation to empower social protection inspections, and I quote, "In the fight against the small number who scam the system, it's important that we address this, otherwise confidence in the system among ordinary contributors and claimants who only claim what they're entitled to will be eroded." And she was referring to those who are leaving the country and not living here and not coming back. In the ordinary course of those compliance checks, the Department of Social Protection are saying to us that the vast majority of those who lost their claims were people who weren't coming back.
Deputy McDonald.
Well, I'm sure the Taoiseach is not suggesting that those 287,000 recipients of the COVID payment are scamming the system, or that they qualify as scammers. I'd like you to make that very clear. These are people who have lost work, who hope Ceann Comhairle to return to work as soon as they possibly can. They are out of work because we are in the throes of a public health emergency. And Taoiseach, it is the case that you are singling out that section, a section of our population, for special and negative attention. Because the facts are that there is no penalty, financial or otherwise, for citizens who are not on the COVID payment should they choose to travel to one of your green list countries. And yet you are saying to all of those citizens who are out of work through no fault of their own that they will face a very, very significant sanction, Taoiseach. The sanction being the removal of their single and only source of income. That is a very harsh measure to take indeed.
Thank you,
and
Deputy.
That does feel like you are picking on a very particular section of our population. So you avoided each and every one of my questions. So let me put a very straightforward one to you.
Time is up, Deputy.
An individual in receipt of the COVID payment will be penalised by loss of that payment should they travel abroad. Can you tell us, Taoiseach, when that decision was taken? Who decided to change the social welfare guidance? Was it the Taoiseach? Was it you? Was it discussed at Cabinet? And can you tell us, more to the point, if you see fit to end this ludicrous, farcical and deeply, deeply unfair situation?
Taoiseach.
first instance, Deputy, you should withdraw your inference that I suggested 287,000 people were trying to game the system. I never said that, and you know I didn't say that, and you shouldn't have attempted to put those words into my mouth. No, you should disengage from that type of behaviour in here. It's unworthy of you, and it's not dealing with an issue that you're entitled to raise. But don't be attempting to do that. That's not right. It's not fair. Politics, because the whole idea of introducing the COVID-19 payment and the pandemic unemployment payment was to help people through COVID-19, and it did develop very strong social solidarity. And we want to continue to help people in that situation. That's why 600,000 people in the country were on it in May. That's why 287,000 are still on it. And I would like to, in the case of individuals who may not have been aware of this, genuine recipients, I'd like their cases reviewed. That's something I would like to do, because I wouldn't be out to in any way undermine any individual or take from them their legitimate entitlements. I think, though, for those who are leaving the country for good, if you like, and still claiming the pandemic unemployment payment, clearly social protection had to ensure proper compliance in relation to that in reference to the wider taxpayer. It was via, my understanding, a statutory instrument on the 10th of July, which statutory instruments don't have to come before government. It didn't come before government, but it was by virtue of a statutory instrument. And the Department of Social Protection was saying, by the way, that in response to numerous queries, they would have been saying this on and off since early July, but it didn't seem to capture anybody's attention,
time is up.
either in the opposition at the time, bar the Sunday Business Post this Sunday.